Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another recap episode. Thank you, sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggy the Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. Starting with episode 1426 up through episode 1449. Hard to believe it's been more than 1,500 episodes because I've had some that are unnumbered or have suffixes. So still having a good time. So keep going. Give me feedback. If you want more of something, send me emails or see me at a show and just put in a good word for the types of episodes you like or things you think have not been covered that should be covered. So when I do these recap episodes, I think back, there's a diversity of the last 25 episodes, and I want that to be the case. I don't want to be too linear. I don't want it to be all vintage. I don't want it to be all brand new. I don't want it to be all topics and debates, but I want to help round out the history, the hobby, past, present, and future. 1426, John Keating is one of my most popular guests. He's almost like a co-host. He's like Rich because he gives as well as he gets. It's not sparring. It's not boxing. But if it is boxing and sparring, it's with those big gloves that can't knock anybody out because he's a very clever guy. He'll push back, but he's not going to knock me out. He likes to disrupt, but he's also very accommodating and very pro-hobby in the way he does it. Unashamedly, he hobbies the way he does, and one of the good guys and a content creator that follows the beat of his own drum. Thank you, John, for that. Mixed in there, 1426A, when there's a suffix, a lot of times that means it wasn't planned and it was inserted, but that was the tribute to Leroy Jordan that I met. I have spent a little time with him. He was a great player and a nice person, but looking back after 2 months now, not really much effect on his cards, and that's really too bad. And yet you can't manufacture demand. Demand is what it is. Why some people are more collected than others. Again, he's very worthy, but a lot of Cowboy collectors, I'm sure, and Alabama collectors. So good man and gone too soon. 27, 28, the last ramblings with John Keating, more of the same. We just turn it on and then go, and then I have to edit it. 1429, 30, and 31. I just titled them decades ago. Basically, Mark Armour and Jason Schwartz, my friends from Sabre, the leaders of the baseball card group within Sabre, and have really been kind to me. They said they've got some questions about the really old days. And I thought, that's good. I'll answer their questions to the best of my abilities. I'm not prepped, so I'm just trying to reflect back on the way it was in the old days, but they were talking about the really old days. 1432 was the tribute to Bill Kreischer. He was first my friend. When I first met him, this is the same guy. I've got his card. And many of you had that feeling, but I knew the guy. He lived in town. He married a friend of mine when he was a widower, and just a great guy. A lot of times, when I was interviewing people, I'd ask them if they were into sports, what position they played. And if somebody's a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, they're going to have a certain personality. They're not going to get a lot of the glory, although Bill got more than his share of All-American accolades and national championships. But it's not the glamorous position. By the same token, I had a meeting with a young guy who was trying to figure out what he wanted to do next. And he said, I really like music, but I don't think I want to go into it. I said, well, what position did you play in the band? And he said, well, I played bass. I said, okay, so you're not out front. So do you think that might be the way you like to look at life, that you're looking for a supportive, harmonious position in a different company? Because he wasn't really happy where he was. Sharp guy in his late 20s, so he's got a lot of room to expand and grow and check things out. 1433 and 34 were the outtakes on the Basketball Card Hall of Fame, which is a new thing with Ray Fonio. Really enjoyed doing that. This time, Ray and others, I will be closer to the will of the people, of the other voters. But I'm realizing that all Hall of Fames start out great. And then every year, it's not that it gets cheapened, but you keep expanding. And after a few years, you've selected most of the obvious ones, and then you're sometimes stretching, and I think baseball is doing that, football to some extent, but the Basketball Card Hall of Fame is the first year. Ray, thank you for being a doer, not a dreamer, and making your dream come a reality in all those different sports. I applaud that. 1435 was the Deconstructing Eye Appeal. I'm moving hard into that. I've listened with interest as Jeremy Lee of Sports Cards Live is promoted that concept, but it's not just him, it's a bunch of people. In fact, it's more collectors than investors. They're looking to fill their collections with nice cards that they don't necessarily want poor condition, but very good or excellent, which is not near mint, something that's very good or even fair with good eye appeal. Reminiscent of the episode I did 5 years ago, I think, of FCG grading, of front and center grading. Eye appeal is based on looking at the card and saying, hey, that looks nicer. And then you see the number and you think, wow, that looks better than a 3. That looks like it should be an 8. But you're not looking at paper loss on the back of the card. On the other hand, maybe it doesn't bother you. So you're going to get a better deal for something that has an equivalent front and equivalent centering to something that is much more expensive and presents the same as long as you're just looking at the front. 1436, outtakes from Hobby Hotline. September is when Hobby Hotline moved to a new network, let's say. They're now with 4 collectors. So it's been an influx of new talent, new energy. And I always enjoyed it. I love all cards, but I love some more than others. I like most of the podcasts out there, but some more than others. But Hobby Hotline is taking a step up. So I strongly encourage you to check out The Real Thing. The Real Thing is in video, and you can see the interplay among the hosts and see the comments and all that. It's live and it's fun. So I encourage you to do that. In the meantime, for those of you who miss it, out of an hour, I'll carve out 15 or 20 minutes sometimes and provide it for you, my listeners, to this podcast. 1437, a little bit of an anomaly. It came out of the blue, got contacted by a guy I didn't know, admittedly not sports per se, but it checked enough other buttons that I thought there's some sports card insights here. Touched on my friend Ernie White, who's passed away, Tough Stuff, which is no longer around, but it was certainly a force in the industry for a few decades. An eBay connection, Tucker Freeman Smith, that I knew back when he was Ernie White's key editor. And those peanut sets, I remember that, but it didn't do well enough because when something does well, it's repeatable. And Ernie had done some other card sets and had a card shop. I think that was an interesting idea, but did not work as well as he would have liked. 1438 was the mailbag, the first time I've ever done that. I've really don't get a lot of mail. But then when I started thinking, oh, actually, yeah, I do get mail. If I think about it in a broader context, I do get things, and it's a treat. I know when the crossover, Chris Hoge and Josh are talking about their mail days and all that stuff, I just think, I like that too. Who doesn't like to go get mail when you open up his cards? The difference is most of the cards that I get in the mail, I don't know what's inside the box. And most of the cards that they're talking about, they do know what's in the box. So I don't talk about the specific cards in the box as much as the fact that I got a box and there were some great cards in there. That was fun just to gather my thoughts on, like, I love to open product, but I don't buy a lot of product, but who doesn't love opening product? 1439 and 40 were the card shows of the future, the way I titled it with Tony Goza, who's done other kinds of shows, but is doing a show up near the casino across the border. And really, I'm not saying this is the way of the future, but when you look at what Fanatics is doing, they're big into cards, but they're even bigger into apparel, and they're probably going to be even bigger and bigger into gambling. They've got the memorabilia, they've got entertainment. And so that's what Tony's doing. He's putting together a show. It's right next to a gambling facility that's got great entertainment. He's going to have cards and memorabilia. He'll probably have some Pokemon. The apparel is what people wear to the card shows. I just think, I wish Tony well. He's going to do it on a specific weekend in April with the Pro Football Draft, and I hope that comes together. I'm not sure I can go, but I'm hoping it does well. 1441 was the tribute to Nacho Arredondo. I knew him for maybe 40 years. He's passed away now. Worked with Kit Young for many years. Was just a dear guy and a trusted guy. Kit has some great teammates, just like I did. And we could get in a battle of who had the best teammates. But anybody that worked for him could work for me because they were quality guys that knew the hobby and were hardworking and honest. Nacho was certainly one of those. And I knew him before he worked for Kit, and he got some bad cancer. But it was a good chance to catch up with Kit. There's some Mount Rushmore out there that Kit is on. That will be the Hawaii show, Mount Rushmore. He will be most of them out. 1442, peak or peak. That was just my thought. How do I start this conversation? My leadoff question, just to get the idea of whether people are looking forward, backward, or just enjoying the energy and the dynamism that's in the hobby right now. I didn't restrict what they could talk about. It actually, we wanted 2 of the 15-minute segments were about that. I like to keep it to 15 minutes, but there were 12 outstanding people in the room. It's not herding cats, but you can't ride hard on them too much. They want to say what they want to say. They're articulate. The problem is the acoustics are difficult. 1444 was the second mailbag. And it turns out that when you talk about something, you get more of that. So I started getting some more mail after I said I liked mail. If you're thinking about buying a new car, I think I'm going to buy a red car. Now I'm not. But if I said, I think I'm going to buy a red car, You drive around the next few days, you're going to see more red cars than you can imagine because you're tuned into it. So I started talking about Mailbag, and I got Mailbag. And then I even got another Mailbag that was the 2025 Donruss WNBA product from Panini, and I opened up that. I thought, this stuff is challenging the men. Now, again, there's going to be a license change, but we're in a situation where if it works for the NBA, it can work for the WNBA. Now, they've got a shorter season, less players, but that league is coming on strong. And they've got downtowns and kabooms. And the other thing I realized, here's my interesting sports card insight. Panini is going to keep producing cards. And of all the cards that Topps does, Panini does, Upper Deck does, the ones most conducive to doing a partially licensed version are downtowns, because you're allowed to talk about the city. You're just not allowed to talk about the team nickname. That's the trademark. You can talk about the player. And so they'd have to have a downtown, an image of the player, whether it's the WNBA or NFL eventually or NBA. You can show a really interesting action pose obscuring the logo of that, and that'll work. And it's probably the same thing for kabooms, because the thing you notice about kabooms is not the uniform or the logo. You recognize the player, and it's got this interesting backdrop. So that's Mailbag. 1445 was another one from the Hobby dinner. I didn't title it that way, but this was Skeppy, who was the initiator of the dinner. He said, I'm going to be in town. I said, well, since you're in town, that gives me an excuse to have a hobby dinner. I was going to do one anyway. And the topic he brought was about the gold standard and how with inflation and the value of the US dollar, how you define how much money you make comes back to gold in many cases, because you have that choice. 1446 was the conflict of interests. This is the one that Jason, Professor Sports Cards, thought that wasn't taken that seriously. Actually, it was taken pretty seriously, but something is lost in the audio, Jason. And for those of you others, it's hard to know who's talking, but there was a strong group of people in there. What I would say in hindsight now to Jason and others is that what came across, if you didn't pick up on it, is that Chris Ivey, Heritage, and Leon Lucky of Net 54, and a couple of key guys from Topps, from BGS, Ron Palmer, all these guys are interested in protecting the brand. So anything you're doing with respect to conflict of interest or potential or perceived conflict of interest, the main thing is protecting the brand. When I threw some things out there, you could see Chris Ivey wince and say, no, we wouldn't go there. And it's nothing illegal. It's just we protect our brand and we want people to know what we stand for and what we do. Ron Palmer, he was clear in saying, here's what we do, but here's what we no longer do, because we want to stand for something. We want people to know this is who we are. This is how we do it. 1447 was the final hobby dinner con. That was 2.5 hours. So I basically chopped it out. There's small talk and crosstalk that didn't make the cut, but a lot of good stuff. And the people enjoy coming and I enjoy doing it. So this was about base cards. And Skeppy dared to say, does this mean now that there's a resurgence of interest in the junk wax when it's unopened that they maybe didn't print too much? And I said, no, actually they did print too much, but what's left over and has not been opened, there's still enough of that for people to have some fun with that. And they are. And then finally, 1448 and 49 were from Hobby Hotline just a few weeks ago, again, with the new regime. And we started out talking about Pokemon. And my last point here, as we finish this up, is that you read in the news about immigration policies of letting people in. It's not letting people in to the card hobby to come to a card show. They can pay their admission and come in. But if they're coming to go to the island of Pokemon instead of the island of baseball or football or basketball, that's not disallowed. What I'm trying to do is make sure that once they come in and they're immigrating with respect to interest in Pokemon, I want them to stick around. And if they're going to emigrate anywhere, it's not to leave the country. It's not to leave the show and never come back. It's to think, you know what? I noticed there's a lot of energy and interest in the sports products. And I love sports. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to emigrate to the sports card hobby. So if we have lots of people coming in and doing Pokemon and they stick around for the sports, that is going to be a win-win. Now, if there's people who are coming in for sports and going to Pokemon, same thing. I want to figure out, why are they doing that? What's missing? So we had that conversation. So thanks, everybody. Great hobby. And another couple months go by with another 25 episodes. Keep your questions coming, and I will look forward to interacting with you either that way or at a future show. So thanks again.
The man in the house of cards.